few weeks ago, my animated band Big Sand played their first live show in a physical venue. I want to tell you how it went, how I did it, and what I would do differently next time. Quick refresher, Big Sand is my sci-fi virtual band. Kind of like Gorillas, but with less Damon Albarn and more giant alien bugs. I've written the music with some of my favorite Aussie artists, and I've been learning to animate the characters using Unreal Engine and motion capture. Thing is, I really want the band to be able to perform live and interact with a real audience. So I've got this very big question, which is how can an animated band perform in a physical venue? And while I'm at it, I thought I would also ask another question, which is how could artists tour with less travel? This question is important for me personally because I've done a bunch of touring, and to be honest, I just don't really like the lifestyle of living in planes and hotels and airports and vans away from your family and friends for a really long amount of time sometimes. But I also think it's really important for the music industry as a whole to ask this question because we know that touring and travel has a really big impact on things like carbon emissions and the mental health of artists, and it's also just becoming more expensive and more difficult. So I wanted to try and look at finding an answer to both of these questions by performing a live motion capture music gig between two different remote locations. So this is how I did the first ever prototype performance. The venue is called The Lab, and it's this really cool music room with 50 square meters of LED walls. This is where the audience arrived, and when they walk in, the screens showed the panorama of a desert with an empty stage. An ambient soundtrack played as my lovely test audience arrived and grabbed a drink and had a chat. And eventually, from the distance, they saw the band start to walk towards the stage. The band got on stage as the music swelled and the main character waved. And what was interesting is that nearly everyone waved back at Taal. So Big Sam performed their first song, and then they went into this interlude where the lead singer Taal was meant to chat with the audience. So she said hello. Hello. Everyone got really excited and sort of started to interact, and then the sound started dropping out and we had some trouble with the audio. So that was one of the first big hiccups of the show. But it actually didn't stop the audience from joining in when Taal put her hands up and started doing a bit of a side-to-side crowd interaction moment before going into the next couple of songs. So the band played a few more songs, and that took us to the end of the show. And then I came up on a video at the back of the room, did a Q&A, and got some feedback from the audience. So that's kind of what happened in the room on the night, but how did I do it? Well, for this prototype, the content moved between pre-recorded animation to real-time live mocap and then back again. I made most of the song sequences beforehand using my Rococo smart suit in my room, but the interlude was me live broadcasting from a motion capture stage and talking to the audience. So all of the content in the room, in the venue, was playing straight out of Unreal Engine, and to actually get it onto the venue walls, I used 6 virtual cameras and manually angled them one by one so that the edges of each frame lined up. So tech detour, for anyone interested, the virtual cameras that I used were part of something called the Off-World Live Unreal Engine streaming toolkit. What that toolkit does is it lets you take what a virtual camera in Unreal Engine sees and output that as a video feed that other programs can read. So I chose an output format called Spout, which has no latency, but it only works with programs running on the same computer. You can also choose an output called NDI, which has a little bit of latency, but it can be read by any machine on the same network. So yeah, Off-World Live, I found it really handy. They're not paying me, but I've left their website in the comments because I found it really useful. So I had spout outputs from these 6 cameras in Unreal. That went into a program called Touch Designer to sort of line them up nicely. And then that all went into a program called Resolume, which put them in the right location on that really big LED wall. The next question was how to keep all these visuals, these sort of cinematic sequences, in time with the music, which is really important. One option would have just been to play the music straight out of Unreal Engine. This streaming toolkit lets me do that. But I want to be able to do things in future with the live show, like have live vocals and change things up and loop them. And I also want to be able to collaborate easily with DJs and musicians and use software that they're familiar with. So the music lived in a program most musicians will know called Ableton, and it was just laid out really simply, pre-recorded and just played left to right in arrangement view. On this track though in Ableton, there's a bunch of MIDI notes that line up with the start of each section of the show. If you plug these notes into an instrument, you would just hear them going up one at a time, but they're not meant to be heard. These are just here to trigger each new playback sequence in Unreal. So they do that using something called OSC, which is just like a data format that can send information about sound and musical notes, not just on one machine, but around a network. This here is a MIDI to OSC plugin that is included with Ableton Max for Live. So with this, when a MIDI note plays in Ableton, this plugin shouts that out, it broadcasts it, and this blueprint in Unreal Engine is listening for that information. So this all looks a little bit complicated, but it essentially just says, when I hear this note, I'll play this cinematic sequence. And I've just plugged in all the notes that match the different parts of the show. I also want to give a shout out to Michaela from Mod Studio, who built this blueprint and showed me how to use it. Mod do heaps of cool projects. I put their website in the comments so you can check it out, and I've also put a link to this blueprint if you want to be able to do something similar. So at the venue, we've got Unreal Engine, there's a bunch of virtual cameras outputting video to the walls. There's also Ableton playing out the music and triggering each of those cinematic sequences in Unreal Engine to keep everything in time. However, I am actually not at the venue at all. I am 20 minutes down the road in the motion capture stage at Flinders University. So this is a space called The Void, and shout out to Cam and Jason from The Void for helping me get this suit set up and streaming via live link into Unreal Engine. Like I said, I've got a Rococo smart suit at home, but this is like a $500,000 mocap stage and I wasn't gonna say no. The next thing I had to figure out was like how to take this mocap performance and stream it into the venue to interact with the audience in real time. And I want to preface this by saying that I don't think the way we did it was necessarily the most efficient way of doing things. We looked at a bunch of different options and there were some that were probably better, but ultimately they needed more time or resources and expertise. And at the end of the day, this is like a DIY project from an indie musician. So the option that I went with in the end was literally just a video stream, a fancy Zoom call. We looked at a bunch of different streaming options because I really wanted to find one that was high res, like it was going on a big LED wall, but it had to be low latency because I didn't want like 7 seconds of lag when I was trying to talk to the audience. We went through like Twitch, YouTube, Wowza. These were all good quality but had more than 5 seconds of latency. Video Ninja was the opposite. It was really fast, but it had pretty bad quality. Zoom had a 40-minute meeting limit, and ultimately, of all things, we actually ended up streaming my performance over Microsoft Teams. We were running the exact same Unreal Engine project at the motion capture stage as they were at the venue. And this meant that all of those virtual cameras that I talked about earlier were in the identical location. And because of this, the plan was to send a feed of just one of those cameras, the one that was pointed at the band, over the internet to the venue, and when it was my time to go live, just do a sneaky switch, move from the camera that was playing in Unreal in the venue to the one that was streaming in from the motion capture stage. And because those cameras were identical, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference. To do this, we just used that same spout plugin I talked about earlier, but this time we plugged it into a program called OBS, which is this amazing free streaming software. If you haven't heard of it, I've got the link in the comments. One thing that OBS does is it lets you use it as like a virtual webcam. So we just selected this option in our Microsoft Teams call, and that let us essentially take that virtual camera input from Unreal Engine and throw it straight onto a Teams call to go off over the internet. So that was a really easy way to get the exact same framing of my performance that could be streamed online, easily just put up at the wall at the venue. They used OBS as well at their end to receive that feed and just crop off the names at the bottom of the Teams call. I told you it was lo-fi. My audio also ran through Ableton at my end, just so I could put some vocal processing on my voice. And now I'm able to process my voice and sound like this, which is really cool and a lot of fun and very silly. And I used a virtual cable plugin, which I'll put in the comments, to plug that audio straight into the Microsoft Teams call. They could take the audio from the Teams call at the lab, at the venue, and plug that straight into the mixing desk so that the audience could hear me talking. And last thing, this might seem really simple, but it was very important. We also used an iPad, a webcam, and a microphone in the venue to send video of the audience back to the Void so that I could see it at my end. We used Video Ninja to not get these two different calls confused, but you could literally use any conferencing program that's like fast and reliable. So that was the setup. Other than my audio dropping in and out, the only thing that really went wrong is that the faceware, face mocap license expired on the day of the performance. So the live face didn't work, but that's a pretty easy fix for next time. I also really want to get to the point where I can just send raw motion capture data between two venues instead of sending video, because that makes a lot more sense. I've seen it done, so stay tuned as I get to that point. But overall, I'm really stoked with how it went. Big thank you especially to the test audience who came out and gave some really good feedback on the night. Thank you to everyone, Cam, Jason, Oscar, Fraz, and the team at the lab for helping put it together. And look, eventually, as I get better at this, I would like to take the training wheels off anything that is pre-recorded so that the whole show and all of the characters are performed live in real time and you get a totally different experience every time you see it. So stay tuned. There's heaps more in the works. I'm working on building out a full-length Big Sound live performance. But thank you for watching in the meantime. I know this was a pretty technical video, but hopefully it was helpful or interesting. If you've got questions or thoughts or you're working on something similar, I would love to hear about it in the comments. And follow along if you want to stay tuned for the rest of this adventure.